Hello and welcome. I want to talk to you today about self awareness and some reflection practices, that inner work that shapes us as better leaders and better decision makers. So, the big point is growth does not start with doing more. And so, let me start with a simple question. When was the last time you actually paused and thought about how you're showing up as a leader? And I don't mean pause to plan your week or pause to solve a problem or pause to make a decision. I mean truly paused just to notice. Because most leaders I know are really good at action. They move fast, they execute, problem solve, carry responsibility well. But what a lot of leaders struggle with isn't the doing, it's the reflecting. And the truth is, self awareness and reflection are some of the most powerful tools you can have as a leader, not because they slow you down, but because they sharpen you. So, today we're talking about self awareness and reflection practices, things like journaling, asking for feedback, and doing ongoing identity work as a leader. And I want to say this up front, these are not soft habits. These are foundational skills that improve your judgment, your clarity, and your emotional regulation and the quality of your decisions. So, if you want to lead with wisdom instead of just effort, this conversation matters. So, let's talk about why self awareness is the root skill of leadership. Self awareness is one of those skills that sits underneath almost everything else in leadership. It sits underneath communication, decision making, conflict, emotional intelligence, resilience, all of it. Because without self awareness, leadership becomes reactive. You're responding to things without realizing what you're bringing into the room. But with self awareness, leadership becomes intentional. And here's something I've noticed over and over again. A lot of leadership problems aren't because leaders don't know what to do, it's because they don't realize what they're doing. They repeat the same patterns because they can't actually see the pattern. They react before they reflect. They make decisions under pressure without questioning their assumptions. They lead from habit instead of values. But self-aware leaders do something different. They notice themselves before they correct others. They ask, what am I bringing into this situation right now? And honestly, that question alone can change everything. Reflection is not overthinking, it's leadership hygiene. Reflection gets a bad reputation sometimes. People hear reflection and think it means overthinking or being self absorbed, thinking too much, or sitting around in your feelings. But healthy reflection isn't about getting stuck in your head, it's about learning from what you're living through. I like to think of reflection as leadership hygiene. You don't brush your teeth because they're already clean. You brush them because you're preventing problems. Reflection works the same way. It prevents the blind spots. It reduces emotional buildup. It improves decision quality and it clarifies direction. Because without reflection, what happens? Leaders move from one situation to the next, carrying unresolved tension and unexamined assumptions. And then they wonder why they feel off or exhausted or disconnected from their team. And over time, you don't just get tired, you drift. And so I want to talk to you about why leaders end up avoiding reflection even when they know it's helpful. Because here's the honest truth, most leaders don't avoid reflection because they think it's pointless, they avoid it because it's uncomfortable. Reflection requires slowing down. And I can say for myself, sometimes it's hard just to slow down. It requires sitting with uncertainties, and sometimes it reveals misalignment. And so for high capacity leaders, there's often this fear underneath it all that, if I pause, I'm going to lose momentum. But what I've found is the opposite is usually true. Leaders who never reflect end up spending more time fixing preventable issues. Reflection creates clarity, and clarity creates efficiency. So we have to create space for reflection in a busy life. One of the biggest objections I hear is, I don't have time to reflect. I just don't have the time. And I get it, but reflection doesn't require hours, it requires intention. 5 minutes of honest reflection can be more powerful than an hour of distracted thinking. How many times do you pick up your phone just to look at it? And I guarantee you more than 5 minutes goes by and you realize, oh, what did I even pick up my phone for in the first place? The goal is not perfection. It's a rhythm. And some simple ways to build that reflection into your life might just be a few minutes at the end of the day or a short weekly check-in. Or maybe it's pausing after a hard conversation and taking time after a major decision. Sometimes I have to just go to the bathroom and just sit in a stall to be able to just take an intentional moment away from all human beings because I know it's the only place that I won't get interrupted and just slow down and regroup, recalibrate, process so that I can then come back a better version of myself. So, reflection is less about duration. It is more about the consistency and making sure that we're doing it. And reflective journaling can be a great leadership tool. Journaling is one of the most practical tools for building self awareness, not because writing is magical, but because it slows your thinking down enough for you to actually hear yourself. It can help leaders with identifying emotional patterns and clarifying their thoughts, processing experiences that they have going on, and recognizing the triggers anytime that, somebody ends up triggering you and A plus B always ends up equaling C, and I'm triggered by that. It helps separate facts from stories. And by the way, journaling doesn't have to be poetic and it doesn't have to be something that you did in middle school talking about your middle school crush. It doesn't have to be something that you share. It just has to be honest. It's a form of reflection. And so maybe here's a few prompts that you can consider that I think are powerful. What happened today that stuck with me? And that could be good or bad. Or how did I respond emotionally and why? Think about these questions right now. What assumptions did I make today? What would I do differently next time? And what did I learn about myself today? Because consistency matters more than eloquence. And using reflection to improve your decision making is important because most leaders make decisions under pressure. And sometimes they're great decisions, sometimes they're rushed decisions, and sometimes they're I had to just decide something kind of decisions. And reflection helps you improve your decision making over time because you start learning from your choices instead of moving past them. After a decision, you can ask, what information did I prioritize? What did I ignore? How did fear or urgency influence me? Did this align with my values? That kind of reflection builds pattern recognition. And over time, your decision making becomes clearer, becomes calmer, and it just becomes more aligned. And I suggest seeking feedback as a self awareness practice. It can be hard. You don't always want to hear it. But feedback is one of the fastest paths to growth if you approach it the right way. A lot of leaders ask for feedback casually, or they ask, but they're secretly hoping everyone will say, you're doing great. Or they ask, but they end up getting defensive the second they hear something that they don't like. And so, real feedback seeking is intentional and curious, and it might look like asking very specific questions or listening without explaining yourself or resisting the urge to defend and justifying or looking for patterns instead of one off comments. And here's a great few questions to ask. What is one thing that I do that helps the team? What's one thing I could do differently? And where do I create confusion or friction? Because if you actually ask the question, somebody might actually tell you the truth. And here's something important: not all feedback requires immediate action. Sometimes feedback just simply gives you awareness, and the awareness is what gives you options. So, if we talk about separating identity from our feedback, this is one of the hardest parts of leadership growth. Leaders often personalize feedback, they hear it as a judgment of who they are instead of information about what they did. But healthy leaders separate identity from performance. You can be a strong leader and still need to adjust. You can care deeply and still miss something. And you can be capable and still have some blind spots. because we're all human. Nobody's perfect. And feedback does not define you, it informs you. That's it. And when you can hold that mindset, you stay open instead of being in defense mode constantly. And so, just for me personally, um, I had to learn how to ask these questions so that I can grow and change. And I have always made it clear with teams that I never take offense to anything. You don't have to preface before you tell me whatever you're going to say. I'm not trying to hurt any feelings. Don't take this the wrong way. Just tell me because I want to know how to be better. And I'm going to take what you have to say, I'm going to process it. Sometimes I might process it and say, I don't think that applies. I disagree. But most of the time, I'm going to process it and say, I think there's some truth in here. And there can be any level of truth, maybe 10% truth or 100% truth. Man, you really nailed it on the head. You're totally right. I need to work on that, or I could fix that next time. But everybody's perspective is different too. And so you don't have to take 100%. You might take 70% of what they're saying, and they don't need to know it, but you can decide how to process and internalize it. And so that was something that worked for me really well, to be able to, number one, not be in defense. Number two, always try to not have to have an explanation when they are giving you feedback. They don't really care about your explanation. You ask for feedback, they're giving it to you. And so this is a hard thing for anybody to work on because it requires us to be vulnerable. But it's important as we work on our ongoing identity work as a leader, because leadership identity isn't static. It evolves over time as responsibilities grow and seasons change and life shifts. But a lot of leaders keep trying to lead from an outdated version of themselves. The leader you needed to be 5 years ago might not be the leader that you need to be now. Identity work is when you ask deeper questions, like, who am I becoming as a leader? What values guide my decisions? What kind of leader do I want to be remembered as? And where am I leading from fear instead of alignment? This kind of reflection prevents misalignment between what you believe and how you behave. Aligned leaders lead with clarity and confidence. So use reflection as a tool for your emotional regulation. Reflection is also one of the best ways to regulate our emotions, because unprocessed emotion does not disappear. I promise you, it leaks. And nobody likes a leak, whether it's in the fridge, whether it's on the counter. You stick the beef out and didn't put something underneath it, it's leaking. I can say that from experience just yesterday. It shows up as impatience. It shows up as withdrawal or over control, short responses, or maybe snapping at people that you actually care about. And so reflection helps you respond instead of react. You can ask questions like, what emotion was present in that moment, or what triggered it, and what did I need that I didn't express? That builds emotional literacy, and emotional literacy builds emotional regulation. When you can understand it, slow down, process, you can you can explain it to yourself in your own brain so that it makes sense. And then that allows you to be able to better regulate. And so it's no different than our body trying to regulate the temperature in our body. If we're working out, we go for a run or do strength training or whatever kind of exercise, and our body gets warm, it's going to regulate itself by producing sweat and producing, increased heart rate so that it can help regulate itself again. And so this is just a natural process of human nature. And so if reflection feels overwhelming, I want you to make it practical. Here's some simple frameworks that you can use anytime. Number one, what happened? Number two, what did I notice about myself? And three, what will I carry forward? That's it. Just keep it simple. You can ask those questions daily, weekly, or after hard moments when you got to get yourself into a bathroom stall and just ask those three questions. And structure is going to make reflection easier to practice. And if we talk about the compound effect of reflection over time, reflection doesn't create overnight transformation. It creates the gradual, meaningful improvement where you can look back years from now and be like, holy cow, we have made huge movements forward, but it was the gradual movement. And small insights are going to stack up. Patterns are going to become more visible. And the emotional intelligence is going to increase in you. And decision making is going to sharpen. And over time, reflective leaders develop something deeper than skill. They develop wisdom. They know themselves. They understand others. They lead with intention. It's not flashy leadership, it's effective leadership. And so I encourage you to think about these things because as we go through these patterns that we go through with reflection, it's easy to be triggered. It's easy for our habits to come back where we're getting back out of the habit and we don't realize how that's going to affect us until we look back and be like, holy crap, how did we just get here? And so I encourage you to practice these. And so as I close, um, what are you willing to look at? As we close, I want to leave you with a few questions. Where am I avoiding reflection because it feels uncomfortable? And what pattern keeps showing up in my leadership? And that may be uncomfortable to think about, but you need to. What feedback have I been dismissing that deserves attention? And what might change if I slowed down long enough to gain clarity? Leadership growth does not start with doing more. It starts with seeing more. And the leaders who grow the most aren't the ones with the most answers. They're the ones willing to ask the best questions of themselves. So, thank you for taking this time with me today. I am so grateful to spend a few minutes with you. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who can benefit from it too, because I am blessed to be a blessing for others. And just remember that self-awareness isn't a destination, it's a practice, and it deepens over time. And if you want to join me in our life and leadership coaching program, I would love to work beside you week to week to help you grow and change in your life and leadership. And I hope you have a wonderful day.